in today's video. I talked to Barney Angliss. Barney is a SEND advisor, trainer, speaker and researcher who was diagnosed with Asperger's when he was 49. I speak to him about his career as a teacher, what it was like growing up for him, and what it was like when he finally got his diagnosis. Hey guys, and welcome to another video of MaxiAspie and this series Autism Connections, and today I have a very special guest. Today on the show I have Barney Angliss. Thank you, Barney, for joining me and coming on to the Autism Connections today.
Oh, well, you're very kind to ask me.
The first question really I've got to ask you, and I ask this to everyone so don't worry, is what is your connection to autism?
Oh, well, when I was 49, I was diagnosed with Asperger's. And of course, we don't use that anymore, but it still seems the right one to me. I don't find that I have a lot in common with people who have a different diagnosis, but when I meet someone with Asperger's, and it just fits very, very well. But you know why it took that long to get diagnosed, I think, was really because I found a job that suited me, that worked with Asperger's, and that was teaching. And I got into teaching completely by accident. It wasn't what I planned to do at all. But once I got into it, I realized it's so much easier as a job than other things, if you're like me, because the conversation only goes in one direction at a time in a classroom. So, you know, you're not all allowed to speak at the same time, and everything has to be very explicit so that everyone else in the room can understand it. So I could control the flow of information. And also, I think when you're a teacher, you don't need to know what children are thinking in order for you to do what you plan to do. You do need to know what they're thinking in order to understand why they're not getting it, or why they're bored, or why they're very restless. But that comes at a later stage. You can start the lesson with a plan, and you don't need to know at that point what their intentions are. You know, on the whole, their intention is just to get in the room, put up with you for an hour, and get out again, you know. And so it kind of worked because I thought I knew what was happening in the room. And then I realized I got on better with the kids who were difficult, who were not straightforward. I just found them more interesting. And I'd rather kind of let them talk so that I could just try and figure out what was going on in their heads. And that's how I ended up in special needs, basically.
That's amazing. I mean, that's one of the things I still struggle with. I mean, I've done over 100 speeches now around autism, and the one thing I always find hard is going into a classroom and grasping the attention, because it can be quite difficult. Yeah, for yourself as a teacher, what sort of tips and strategies did you use to sort of grasp the attention of our younger people with special educational needs?
Well, I think I had their attention because they were probably wondering, what the hell is he doing? Well, my early lessons, first of all, I've got to tell you, my very, very first lesson of my whole teaching career, I missed it because I didn't understand the time or the timetable, or like whose letters were on the timetable. I had no idea. And I was sitting in the staff room and someone else was doing my lesson for me. And that was kind of an autistic thing. I just did not put all the pieces of information together at all. And for the first few months, I didn't really know what was going on. But in the lessons, um, I didn't really have a problem getting their attention because I was so into what I was doing, and I would have like loads of stuff to talk about, and sooner or later part of it would appeal to each person. So like there was always something that they got out of it. It was just a bit chaotic, and then like it went on like that for a couple of years, and by then I'd sort of found my feet and I knew what to do if things were going wrong, but um yeah, I would never claim to have been a great teacher, but
Oh,
I always think that I've been a good special needs coordinator. Once I got into that, and I did that for 14 or 15 years, once I got into that, um, that was I knew what I was doing there because you know, I knew what the kids wanted from me and I could make that work.
it sounds like you would have been an amazing teacher because you understood the individuals. I always say, you could read 30, 40 books on autism, on special needs, but if you don't understand how it affects the individual, you might as well throw them out the window. So it
Yeah,
seems like you grasped, you know, what to do in those situations for
yeah,
those people. And that's a real key to it. I found the best help I got was when people really understood me, sat me down for maths. They realised I probably wasn't going to be very good at it, and I probably
yeah,
wasn't going to be very interested. Um,
yeah,
but apply something that did interest me, I was flying away with it.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I
It's
suppose,
it's playing to our strengths, isn't it? When we're doing the thing we love or
yeah,
talking about the thing we love, then we know we're okay.
absolutely. And I think a lot of the sort of stigma around autism, Asperger's as well, was try and not get onto their special interest or what they're, but I think it's took the other way now, actually no,
Yeah,
let them, because
yeah,
it will engage them.
yeah. I used to watch kids' feet and their hands and their eyes, their eyelids especially. I used to go from feet to hands to eyes, right? And I could tell if they were able to process what we were doing and think about, how they wanted to answer to it. Um, According to, whether the hands and the feet and the eyes were all comfortable. And if one part was not comfortable, then I'd think, right, they're stuck. They can't do it. Because like some kids they will know exactly what you're on about and what they need to do, and they'll be just thinking about their response to it. They look like they don't know what they're doing because their eyes are facing over there somewhere or fluttering, or their feet are really shuffling. That doesn't matter.
Yeah,
If you get to know them, you can tell whether they're fine. Just leave them alone, leave them some time and space. They're just processing it and they'll come up with something. But you need to be watching the body as well as the mind. You know what I mean?
absolutely, absolutely. And I suppose it leads to my next question, really, which was, growing up for you, was there a lot of awareness around conditions, and also bit of a multi-part question, but when you finally got the diagnosis, what sort of made you? How long did it take, and what prompted you, to sort of go, oh, okay,
Oh, that is a really good question. Both parts of it. When I was in school, when I was young, I went to a Catholic school run by nuns, which was lovely. And then it was time to move on to bigger school. All my classmates went, and I was told to stay another year. They kept me down. My parents wanted me to stay down. They had a chat with the nuns, and they said, "No, he's not ready. He's going to get bullied, and he doesn't know what's going on, and he can't do numbers. And no, he's just not ready. He's too young." I think I was the oldest in my class, but I was too young in terms of my social awareness. So I did another year. I lost all my friends, and I had to go to the big school and start with new friendships. Um, so like no one knew in those days. That was the mid '60s, late '60s. No one knew anything about it at all. It was just done on the basis of social awareness, and no one thought about, well, do we need to get an assessment of that? No, The system was a bit more loose then. You could make decisions about keeping a child down or putting the child in a different class, whatever, a little more easily. So that's what happened to me. I just got stuck there and had to do a year all over again. Um, and I was really good at some things. Like I wrote the school play when I was about 6 years old, and my mum typed it up. So I could write it in huge handwriting. My mum typed it up. The nuns organized the kids in the class, and we did a play for the parents, and I'd written it all. And I was like a little Napoleon. I was telling everyone what they should do, how they should do it, where they should sit. Oh, you're facing the wrong way. I was like a little director, and I knew the whole thing, and that was about all I could do. And all the way through secondary school, um, the best thing I could do was acting. I did loads of acting, got loads of prizes for acting, and everything else was a bit of a mess. But uh, as for diagnosis, the second part of your question, I think I was just getting very, very angry and frustrated with people, and I think people were sort of pushing back a bit and saying, okay, you can get annoyed from time to time, but you can't be cross all the time
Yeah.
and wanting your way all the time. And I didn't know what it was. And I went to see a psychotherapist just for sort of counseling. And she didn't discuss autism at all. Um, she just wanted to help me kind of reduce the anger by understanding there wasn't a need to be angry. And what she said was really, really helpful, and I still live by it every day now. And this was not in any context of autism or anything else, because she didn't believe in following a kind of medical route to it. She was a very well trained psychotherapist, and she believed that it was it was better just to understand yourself in your own terms. So she told me two things. She said, first of all, you've got to work with it as if it's like the grain in a piece of wood. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That there's that kind of pattern, that direction. And they always say, if you're cutting wood, don't go against the grain. Um, and that's what she said to me. Your anger has a sort of grain to it, but you have to work with it and not try and go against it. So I thought about that for a bit. And then about 2 weeks later, she said to me, um, I went into her room, and I just was sort of exploding with anger about something. And she said, it's wider than you think. And I didn't understand it at all. We had to spend 2 sessions just trying to understand what she meant. And what she meant was the way that I look at things is very narrow, and it has to be wider, because I couldn't accept that my point of view was correct, but someone else's point of view could also be correct. I was convinced that only one of us could be right. And she was saying, well, two things can be true at the same time. It's true for you, but something else is true for them. There can be more than one way to do something. And I have a friend now who says something similar. They say there's room for more than one. And that was the thing I couldn't get. And the psychotherapist taught me that, don't go into things believing there is only one way. There's room for more than that. And you can't go through life expecting to work with people and have relationships with people if you can't accept that there isn't just your vision of it.
Yeah.
Whereas I was kind of exploding because in my head I thought I knew how everything should be, and then someone does something totally different, and I think, what are you doing? And it was that kind of temper. So after that, she was really, really helpful. But after that, I was still getting frustrated, and I was quite hard to live with. I think that was a problem. I was very stressy at home. And so in the end, I found a clinical psychologist who could assess me when I was having a bad patch. Um, and she was great. And she met with myself and my wife and just talked it through. and it made sense. And I've never had to go back for another session with her, because it's when you get it kind of broken down, you can process it all, and you can recognize what's happening.
Do you feel that's that diagnosis, that sort of being able to, I suppose, put a label on it? Do you find that helped? Getting that diagnosis eventually.
It did, and people often ask me, you know, when they're thinking about getting an assessment, people often ask, "Do you think it helped? Does it make things better or worse?" It really helped me. It's helped me in lots of situations where I cannot understand why something is going so badly wrong, or why I have to deal with an organization and they just don't get what my problem is. And then I can say, "This is what it is. Do you know anything about this?" And then they say, "Ah, yeah, we know a bit, but we can sort of look up a bit more information about it." Okay, at least we know what we're looking for. So it's kind of a time saver in that way. But Max, it never tells people everything about you. It doesn't give the whole story.
No. And it's once you met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person.
Yeah, yeah,
One of them could work for one person. You could try it to me, and it just won't work.
yeah,
Uh, and you're dead right. It is such a complex thing to understand. But I think half of the thing that the autism community are aware of is we're aware that no one's going to understand it fully from the get go. But
yeah,
it's just given us the opportunity to work with people, and not just shut it down immediately. Like, oh no,
yeah,
that's going to be too hard to sort of deal with.
yeah,
Um, because I think there's just so much to offer. I mean, we currently are in a situation at the moment where 50% of autistic children are being kicked out of school. 30% of autistic people are in any form of work, so less than 30%. And then we also have autistic people are 7 times more likely to feel lonely. I mean, sort of leads me on to my question. I mean, what do you find that schools, employment, and I suppose government could be doing better to support autistic people?
Well, one thing you mentioned there, employment, and I had an experience where I was working for an organization in an open plan office, and they had a guy there who I'm sure is autistic. And I think they had him on a supported program, and he would work using data on a laptop at someone's desk for a few hours a day. So he came in after everyone else, and he went home about an hour before everyone else. And that all made sense. And he could do his job, he could log in, he could do some data work. But it was in an office in London facing North London with huge windows, so very modern office.
Yeah,
And during the winter, when the sun went down early and the lights of London all came on by 3:30, all the lights were on, and it looked kind of exciting. It was very, very glamorous looking up towards Arsenal Stadium and that kind of area.
yeah,
Um, and you could see like 180 degrees because of these huge windows. And over the windows, they had these blinds with those little, do you know the little white bobbly plastic cords
yeah,
that pull them up and down? Right. So in the afternoon during winter, he would go to the window at about 3 o'clock as the light was failing and watch the lights come on. And he would play with the cord because he could feel those little plastic bumps between his fingers, and he would go up and down with that. And the problem was he couldn't stop. He couldn't tear himself away from that. It was just so comforting to him, and such a perfect feeling to have all of that happening at the same time, the visual and the tactile. And he was getting no work done in the afternoon. And I thought, that isn't fair on him. It's not good for his colleagues or his organization, but it's not fair on him, because at the end of every month his productivity is low.
Yeah.
And when they have to decide, shall we continue with this program? Can we get more funding for it? They're probably going to be negative about it because they don't see him doing a lot of work. Well, that's because he's not supported when there's this huge distraction of light and texture and so on. And I thought, that's why these programs don't work. It's because people take an interest and they commit to doing something without fully understanding what they're going to need to do.
Yeah.
And if he had someone who would just come and do their work next to him, between 3 and 3:30 when all those lights were going on, if they could just sit next to him, that would probably be enough to keep him focused. They wouldn't have to speak to him. He
Mm.
could do his work, but having someone there would probably keep him focused on, oh yeah, we're here to do the work. And he'd have got another hour of work done probably. And it's such a complex thing, this idea of supported placements. People need to know much more about it before they're asked to commit to it. And I'm lucky to be doing some work at the moment, some research on that. Um, and I can see that there's so much more we can do, but we can't do it unless people have a much deeper understanding. And that's something that may come out of Autism Awareness Week and out of what you're doing, is a deeper understanding of how all of this plays. In terms of schools, I'm an expert witness for exclusions. It's a really, really uh, complex area. Um, and there's a hell of a lot more training needed for governors, because it's governors who have to make the final decision. And if they don't understand these issues, we can't expect them to make good decisions on it. And there is not enough training for governors, and there is no regulated scheme for them. Equally, there's actually no regulation over what I do. And I'm sitting there thinking, how am I able to be an expert witness in this thing when no one is regulating what I do? I trust myself to do a good job because I'm autistic. I know what I'm looking for. But there may be non autistic people doing this job who don't know what to look for.
Very true.
Why aren't we regulating that so that autistic people can be confident about the decisions?
It's really, really true because yeah, I remember going just to get when I was reassessed for PIP, I think it was. I remember the woman who was assessing me for that was, believe it or not, she was a physiotherapist. Okay, so
Right.
she had no understanding, and literally they deemed that no, I'm not suitable for that because I was well dressed, and yeah, that was it. And my mum appealed, and it didn't go any further. Um, and these are the sort of situations where you're thinking, well, I've got someone assessing me that doesn't really know anything about what they're assessing.
Yeah.
So I find that really interesting, actually. But I suppose the other question I had for you as well was, and I get this quite a lot, and I'm always intrigued to hear what people's thoughts are. If you had to describe autism and Asperger's, and the difference, what would you sort of say to that? Because I know we're sort of going in the term of Asperger's is getting less used, and obviously it's really important that you identify with your diagnosis of what actually you feel resembles you, right, and what you was diagnosed with. So a lot of the time I just get what is the difference, and I just would love to hear what your thoughts was on that.
I base this on um, my experience with all of the kids who came through my schools, who were diagnosed as Aspies, because 15, 20 years ago that was quite often used, and all those who were diagnosed ASD but not specifically Aspie. And what I've always found is that kids who I regard as most like me, they want a very definite thing out of every conversation, every interaction, every little activity that they're doing. They're after a particular thing. And I would talk to their parents about it as well. And they would say, yeah, always has in mind the particular thing. And either it's right or it's not. And if it's right, they're happy. And if it's not, they're furious. Um, and that is such a precise thing, and I'm still like that. You know, all my personal relationships are still sort of troubled by this constant demand for the exact thing. You know, so I'm very pedantic with members of my family about what they said. Well, then what you said isn't what you meant. Right, so start it again, say the question again, but this time ask me what you actually want to know, not what, you know, because I'm not here just for a general chit chat. So that kind of thing, and it just drives people mad. I don't see that with people who are diagnosed autistic but have not got the Aspie tag. I think for them it's much more seeking a state of feeling comfortable and able to function well, and so more sensory, um, and that can be sufficient. They don't always need someone to say the exact right phrase, you know, which is what dominates my life. Is you better say the right effing phrase now, or the whole argument is over. You know, it's awful, really. But I think that's it. That autism is a much broader and a much deeper kind of feeling, a state of being that is much more at the core. And if everything is right, um, then okay, we can roll with it, you know, and I will find the things that make me happy in life. Um, for me, it's quite different. Everybody's got to do the right bloody thing, or you know, it's just
Yeah, all hell breaks loose.
yeah, yeah. And some, you know, people have offered me, you know how it is, Max, like people network on social media and then they ask you, do you want to take part in something? And people have asked me to take part in something and it's broken down, you know, disastrously. And they're often autistic people, but that's the difference for me. They're not Aspies.
Yeah,
And if you were an Aspie, you would know I'm not going to enjoy this and I'm going to be difficult about it. And if I were autistic but not Aspie, I would understand what they were looking for, I think. You know, I find it really quite a dividing line, and I don't get on easily with people who don't tune into the Aspie thing, even if they're autistic. And that's not their fault, that's my fault, but it's not a good mix.
I don't know. I'm really at a stage where it's like, oh, okay, so yeah, that does bother me, you know, with the texture, with the sensory. But I'm also at the stage where it's like the Asperger's is like, well, you didn't say that, or you didn't ask me to do that, and
Yeah,
you know, and it's so tough because it is like a mixture of trying to combat the both. You know, I've had it
yeah,
when I was at school. You know, John Reed, that we both know, turned around and said, "Right, everyone write 1 to 7," and I wrote down 1 2 7. Everyone wrote down the correct thing, and I'm like, "Well, you didn't ask me that, John. You know, you asked me to write down 1 2 7, and that's what I've done." And I still have it at work now. You know, someone will ask me to do something.
yeah.
There was a thing over a number. You know, so someone wrote a postcode, and it was like they said 29, but I wrote 20 and then 9, but they meant
Mm,
29. You know, oh no, it was
mm.
the other way around. I wrote 29 and they meant 209.
Right.
Well, you said
Yeah,
29.
yeah,
It's like, no, 29. I'm like, you know, what? You know, so I completely get where you're coming from. You know, it's such a hard thing to combat. And I think with the other conditions, with the OCD and the ADHD that I've also got, does not help in the slightest. You know, because some
mm,
of them are so
mm.
logical and so.
That's such an important thing. I'm lucky. I don't have ADHD, and I know lots and lots and lots of people with ADHD, and I I always feel, you know, gosh, how do people cope when they have that as well? Because the ADHD, in some people, ADHD and ASD kind of sit quite well together because one takes the edge off the other. It softens the other a little bit and
Yeah,
it helps out. I mean, people with ADHD, I think quite often enjoy a novel experience. So, oh, something new. Oh, I'll have a look at that, and it gets you out of a kind of a rut that you were in. So that's quite a good complementary balance. But other people, the two halves make each other worse. The ADHD and the autism, they just clash, within one person. So I'm always counting my blessings in a way that I don't have ADHD. But then people I know with ADHD would say, "Ah, well, you're missing out. You know, we have more fun."
Yeah. No, I have to say I'm unfortunately on the side where it's like, I don't know. For me, it frustrates me a bit more because I've got these conditions, and maybe it's more the OCD, to be honest. I mean, the OCD does really um, annoy me because I could be doing something and I'll be like, "Oh, is that the autism, or is that the OCD? Is it bugging me that it's not that way because the OCD, or is it bugging me because I like my routine, I like my structure, and I want it done that way?"
Mm. Yeah.
Um, so it's so confused, but it's forever learning. And I suppose that leads me on to my last question, which was, you know, if anyone could take anything out of today's interview, like a meaning, like a really take home message, what would you like that to be?
I think I'll go back to that thing that was said to me a long time ago. It's wider than you think, and you can be happier if you can embrace the width of it. Understand that what you see, it maybe could be a little wider. Take in a bit more of what's going on, and that's a really good thing to work on. Um, that that's what I've valued most in everything that's happened to me, is understanding that width. If you can get that, it really, really helps.
It's, as John always said to me, it's keeping the individual at the heart of the provision, and it's almost knowing the individual and getting to know them and how those conditions affect them, and realizing that there is a bigger picture. It isn't just as straightforward, which I find ironic because growing up, I think autistic people are taught all the time, it's not black and white, there are grey areas. And yet, when we grow up and we're looking to get a diagnosis, or we're looking to employment, everyone looks at us very black and white. Oh, they're autistic, they can't do it. Or no, they're not autistic, they're just naughty. It's all these sort of black and white thoughts that then hit us. So it's really
Totally. Yeah.
interesting.
Interesting to look back at it, and thank you for your questions, Max, because um, I think you've hit on it very, very well. The key lessons to learn are how you've got on, and maybe what could work better in the future. But it's only through, I think, conversations like this that you can get a new direction.
Absolutely, and honestly, Barney, I can't explain how much I loved having you on. So thank you ever so much for agreeing to come on.
Oh, it's a pleasure, absolute pleasure. Anytime. Keep
Just
up the good work.